Alright everybody, welcome back to another Xvault Gaming video. Xvault here, and today I want to go over a possible acquisition by Sony. This one being, per the thumbnails you can see, for Square Enix. Let me bring here to the light, or to the forefront of the news itself, is the fact that this is a very high possibility. Lots of outlets and a lot of insiders have actually stated that this is something that could be big and in the works, but without further ado, let's go ahead and jump to it. Alright, so what I'm going to go over here again is the acquisition talk of Square Enix being acquired by Sony themselves. So pulling this via the PlayStation Lifestyle website, they do have the same tweet that I've been able to find via Jeff Grubb. If you don't know who he is, he's another insider and another influencer, and also has worked with a lot of these folks as well, and has been pretty on the money with most of his tweets and most of his outings and everything like that. So there's a lot of weight to that, but we'll go over this here. So apparently Sony buying Square Enix is still a possibility. Per the tweet itself is what I'm going to go over, and we're just going to go ahead and talk about this a little bit, but he quotes the state on his tweet, Jeff Grubb does, "Okay, I've said this 1,000 times, but there's always someone who is hearing it for the first time. We never really hear enough to report on acquisitions with any certainty. Sony acquiring Square was the big rumor, but I cannot confirm that, and I continue to not know." So he goes on to state, "Don't get hung up on the blockchain stuff. It seems to me that Square CEO is fixated on it because he thinks it helps him in negotiations and earnings calls, but potential buyers can see through it." So they go on to state with PlayStation Lifestyle anyways, not Jeff Grubb at this point, "While it's plausible that Square Enix is priming itself for an eventual sale by shedding its liabilities," which recently is my previous video with Embracer Group, nabbing up a lot of the Western IPs like Tomb Raider and Deus Ex and so on and so forth, they have kind of shed that off, right? So Sony does have history of closely working with the company. It also previously held a stake in Square Enix, and it just so happens that the likes of Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts alone would make for a lucrative deal, with Final Fantasy XIV partially satisfying Sony's renewed urge to expand its live service portfolio. As for why Sony didn't snag those IPs that went to Embracer Group, profitability is a major concern, and it's possible that they didn't fit into the company's vision for the future. Besides, Sony already has an answer to Tomb Raider and Uncharted, which I agree, that's my kind of other synopsis of that. So basically, I don't think it's a big loss with Deus Ex, Tomb Raider, and a few of the others going out to the Embracer Group themselves. I think that's smart, and it keeps those multi-platform, right? So that's a win-win for everybody involved for the most part if you're not playing the console war type of thing. But I've always stated, out of all of the companies I would love, for me being a primary PlayStation preferred owner and platform player, I've always wanted them to have Square Enix. I just felt like Final Fantasy had always been home to PlayStation ever since Final Fantasy VII and so on. They did the kind of almost like the remasters, but it's just kind of like a remaster collection-ish. Back when they had the Anthology collection with Final Fantasy VI, and I think they had Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy IV or something like that on there, which Final Fantasy VI being Final Fantasy III. So all the chronological stuff, but correct me if I'm wrong on those interpretations. But the Anthology, I think, had three for sure, but possibly more. I can't remember the full collection, but nonetheless, that was a thing. I mean, like I said, they've had stakes in Square Enix. They just work closely. Final Fantasy XIV translated supremely well over to the PlayStation 3, and even the 4, and now PlayStation 5. So they've worked great close partnerships, making an MMORPG, which is a phenomenal MMO, to work on consoles, and had a really great relationship there. We've also seen Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Episode Yuffie to the platform of PlayStation being exclusive console-wise. It did also go to PC, but PlayStation is playing nice with the PC market base and the platform share there. So that's not really surprising, but the surprising part is the early talks and a lot of the insiders and influencers did come out and state, oh yeah, it's only a year deal with Final Fantasy VII Remake. You'll see it on Xbox and such like that a year later, maybe a year and a half later. Well, here we are well over a year later. We had the episode Yuffie. We still have the PS5 upgraded stuff. Final Fantasy 16 is currently timed and has been timed, and haven't heard any other talks about how long that would be timed as well. So there's just a lot of plausibility that this is something that's been a long time in the works, and maybe to shed a few $1 million, or in this case, shed an extra $300 million, which is what Embracer Group did do to acquire those IPs like we just talked about. Shaving off another $300 million for some IPs that may not be as important to Sony, as opposed to, like they said, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, and a few other things here. It's a kind of a really big deal, right? So I just really think this is a thing, and one of the big ones. The only other one that would make sense on the tables, which I heard a lot of talk of it being pulled back, was Capcom was a big one for a forerunner or a front runner. And I think that's been pulled back because they've been seeing a lot of success lately, and I don't think they're ready to sell. WB is another one that I think is shopping around yet again, trying to get rid of its IPs for the Batman series and everything else that it's been doing for Warner Brothers. But I really don't think Sony should probably pursue that, contrary to popular belief. But if they have a good foothold on the Marvel side, it makes it very difficult, in my opinion, to make something maybe more exclusive towards their console and PC if you're putting Batman, Suicide Squad, and Arkham Knights or anything else that happens in the future. I think that's kind of counterproductive because not everybody's a Marvel and DC fan. It's pretty rare. It's on the same scope, I would say, as if you're a PlayStation and an Xbox fan, or a PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo fan. Sometimes you have those fans who are just a fan of gaming overall. They prefer them all equally. They may favor one just slightly bit more, but you know what I mean? So it's hard. You either like the gallery and the heroes that are on the Marvel side, or you like them more on the DC. Again, I think that's counterintuitive to have both of those properties. I mean, if Microsoft ends up getting Warner Brothers, then so be it. I think that honestly would be healthy and would actually help their platform a lot more. And they have something there in the superhero genre, and they have the weight of Batman and Superman and Suicide Squad and everything else, right? Nightwing, Red Hood. They just have a lot going on there. So the thing that's holding them up right now is because they went all in, right? They're still working through the acquisition process of Activision and Blizzard. But so that's kind of holding them up. So I think they have to kind of pull back. They can't keep buying stuff. And in my opinion, I think they should have went a little bit smaller, like WB and some other things, rather than boom, Bethesda and ZeniMax and all that stuff, and boom, Activision and Blizzard and all that stuff. Now the money's going to be lucrative, especially more odds are that it's going to go through the Activision Blizzard, but the odds are, you're going to get a lot more lucrative money coming through with COD, Call of Duty and everything else that it has to offer, and the live service stuff like World of Warcraft, and that money's going to funnel in. So that makes sense from a business standpoint there. But if you really want to future-wise solidify your deal, now if WB doesn't get bought up, it's an inevitability that Xbox will if nobody else touches them or another company doesn't acquire them, like Tencent or, again, Embracer or something down the road. It just makes sense that they're going to go somewhere eventually. So you do have that option as well. But I did want to kind of break this all down. I kind of went a little sideways with it, but a lot of acquisition talks and what it makes sense. But I do think it makes sense that Square is on that table. It's been announced. Greg Miller from Kind of Funny had his toes dipped in there, and he knew something, but he was hoping it was going to be announced. So I think they were waiting for this Embracer thing to go through to shed some games off, to shed some funds off, so it's not quite as expensive, not needed to have these IPs. Sony don't want to be known to acquire IPs and then immediately sell pieces off. They don't want to do that. They want to do something that makes sense to them. So I think we will hear something very soon, whether it's Square or not. I think we're going to hear something acquisition related really soon, but my gut feeling does say Square Enix. It just makes sense. Everything just adds up. And, it has more of the fans on the PlayStation side anyways when it comes to the JRPGs and Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and all that. Not saying that there's not for the Xbox side of things, but it certainly is more heavily favored on the PlayStation platform as well as the fans. So just wanted to throw that out there, talk about that. Let me know what you all think about this acquisition. Do you think there's any truth to it? I would love to hear from you, of course, and have some conversation there on your thoughts and opinions there. But I appreciate everybody hanging around for the entirety of the video as always. And at this time, we are at 255 subs out of 300. So if you are new to the channel, definitely consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribing. And for everybody that's been hanging around, thank you again so much. Your support means the world to me. It really does. I couldn't ask for anybody in any community better, so we are at a higher number than I thought I'd ever be. We're just doing this thing, right? So thanks again. Appreciate that. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and hopefully Friday is a quick one and we have the weekend to ourselves if we are off on the weekend. And we'll see you next time on the next Xvault Gaming video. And until then, take care.